Welcome to The Collective, where every conversation ignites a new perspective. Join us as we delve into the journeys of remarkable individuals, explore the art of growth, resilience, and the power of a shared mission as we strive to be better together. Hey everybody, welcome back to The Collective. We have another fantastic show for you planned today. It's a special edition collective where we're going to be talking about photography. Sean will be joining us very shortly, but while we're all waiting for that, y'all should be doing the things like the show, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, do all that good stuff, get your emails whenever we go live, which is of course, well, right now, Wednesdays for The Collective, as well as Fridays for The Collective, but normally Wednesdays for The Gold Mine. If you have any thoughts, questions, comments, anything at all, by all means, put them up in the comment section and we will hit those up right away. The real question that I have for you guys is, who are you? Where you come from? All that good stuff. So give me a quick blurb, 10 to 15 seconds. Pat, what do you got?
Pat Miller. I was 20 years in the military, 8 years special operations, and I've retired a few years ago. I work in the film industry as a military advisor. But since this is about photography, I'll talk about that quickly. I was pursuing a career in photography. I've been into it for a very long time, probably a couple decades. I attended Van Arts for the photography program, and yeah, I just got back from King of Hammers shooting one of the hardest races in the world.
And I cannot wait to hear, but some of the shots that I've seen from it are just awesome so far. So I'm looking forward to seeing the rest of those. Tanya, give us a quick rundown. Who are you?
Sure. I'm based out of Montreal, Canada, and no military, zero years of military experience, but I have a background in graphic design and illustration and lifelong interest in photography. But one year I decided to test out my camera at my local MMA gym, and it has just been a steady semi-pro hobby slash gig that I've been doing for the last few years.
Bam. I like it. I am a complete and utter noob when it comes to photography. I try to take nice photos with my phone, and that's about as far as I got. I don't know anything about composition or light. Well, I know that they exist. Let me put it that way. I know that there are variables to take in. I don't know what they are, but let's talk about it for a little bit while Sean gets his computer sorted out. Pat, tell me about photography from your point of view. What is it that clicks in your brain?
Ooh, going deep already. Like, because like the philosophical point of it, right? Like there's a part of it just creating, capturing the moment, trying to freeze frame that moment. But I found that since retiring and getting out, it's a way to slow down and capture and reflect. Um, it's been it's all encompassing if once you dive into it, right? It slows you down. That's one of the biggest things. It slows you down, and you don't just look at life, you see life, if that makes sense, right? You walk around and you look and you don't see, and we talk about that in the military, right? There's a difference between observing and seeing, and you get a chance to slow that moment down and capture it, which I think is, has a lot of benefits, in life and in psychology, and but also just making art and expressing yourself and creating something cool. It's a great medium for that. Like I like drawing, but it takes me forever to draw something, but I can capture a moment, and then I probably spend the same amount of time in Photoshop. So that was kind of a moot point, but but yeah, that's kind of where I'm at.
I like it. That's one of the troubles with anything that I've seen so far is anything that involves digitization or computer. There's about 7 or 8 jobs that you don't know about before you get into it. And then you realize afterwards, like, oh my God, now I got to learn how to do this and that. And it never really stops. Tanya, what was the thing that clicked in your head?
I mean, Pat really summed it up really well. And yeah, there's a lot of different directions you can go. But for me, it's the art of seeing. It's the art of seeing the moments between the moments for myself personally. And yeah, photography causes you to really pay attention to the world around you, to see, to try different, like literally different perspectives and different points of views to show like an aspect of the world in a way that you haven't seen before. Generally, ideally it's something from a fresh perspective. So that's where I come from.
I like it. I was thinking while you were talking about it, the fact that when I take a photo, I try to be present, try to find the moment, right? But I find that for me personally, because I don't really understand or know what it is I'm looking for, I'm just like, well, that's a pretty sunset. I'm going to try and take a photo of that. But I don't know how to best capture it, I guess, in the moment. Now, so I'm wondering, that is, I assume, the learned skill, being able to actually find the right lighting or find the right angle or develop the photo itself prior to taking the shot, if that makes sense. What do you guys think, Tanya? I'm going to come right back to you.
I would say that, yeah, there's a lot behind it, but well, once Sean gets here, he can corroborate, but I imagine you guys can as well. But I imagine it's very similar to marksmanship rather. It's just a lot of sitting and waiting, or a lot of yeah, it's a lot of just waiting for the right shot and for everything to line up. And thankfully in photography it's a lot less stressful and you can actually control the elements. But yeah, I would say it's about like just it's a learned skill, but it's also more innate than you think.
Interesting. Pat, what do you think?
Yeah, no, I agree with that, and I love the comparison to marksmanship, right? You know what you want, and so it's kind of like photography. Like you see something in front of you, and you know what you want, and what you want to capture. A lot of times, you can paint that picture in your brain, and like shooting, it's like I want that round to go, dead bullseye. But at first, it doesn't hit, and a lot of times when you take your shots, you end up with a image that doesn't reflect the same thing that you had in your mind. And so that skill can be developed fairly quickly, right? Because it's about the decisive moment. Um, it's it's a learned skill, but you can get by, and you can start creating without that skill, right? You can start to see those images in your head, and then when you take the image, you'd be like, if you just ask yourself for a second, why didn't it look the same as in my brain? You can start developing a pretty fundamental photography skill very quickly, and it becomes very rewarding very quickly.
Interesting. I'm digging this already. Now, Sean, you just came back in. Quick question for you was, first off, what was it about photography that really struck you, that really clicked in your brain? And then the follow-on question was the ability to capture a moment or try to capture an image that you see in your own head on the camera itself. Is it a learned skill or is it more innate? So I'll hit you with those two questions, and you can go from there. What do you think?
Sorry for the delay. So I think that, I started photography over 40 years ago, I guess. And interestingly enough, and until you just asked that question, Chance, I'd never really thought of it this way. Photography back then, there wasn't a lot of people doing it. And so, because no one had phones. Nowadays, photography is rampant. I mean, what immediately came to mind is just on our vacation in Thailand, so many people taking so many photos that they're completely unaware of the photo they took. Photos and camera on a phone has become so commonplace that people capture moments and they don't even realize what they're capturing. It's just tick, 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 all over the place. And so that's today. But 40 odd years ago, that was not the way. Not many people had cameras, and not many people wanted to pay to develop film. So the learning process was like something completely different than it is now. So what I will say for any photographers who are starting out, like any budding photographers or anyone who's interested in the hobby or the science or the passion of photography, it's so much easier nowadays because you're not paying to develop. And if you're thoughtful with your photos, you can learn really fast. I guess the key is how thoughtful you are when you're taking your photos. And that's something that you kind of have to learn. You asked innate or learned. I think that it can be an innate skill. Like you can have it in you before you even pick up a camera. You can be a photographer in your soul, perhaps. But how to demonstrate that to yourself first, and then how to demonstrate that to the world as a feedback loop, well, that's a whole different conversation unto itself. So, very simply, I would say that I think you can have it inside of you before you pick up a camera. But even if you don't, I think if I hand a camera to someone that I don't know and spend half an hour with them, I think I can turn them into a photographer.
So this brings my question, because when we were out branding last year, and my son had my phone and he was taking some photos, and I put a bunch of them up online and was getting a bunch of compliments out of it. People were saying, "Oh wow, those are great shots." Is to that degree, is that what you're talking about? Like the innateness of it is that someone can have the eye for like that particular image or something like that, and then be taught the skills afterwards, similar to, you know, being a sniper is about this much in terms of shooting, and the rest is like all the skill sets that you got to build around it. I'm going to come right back to you, Sean. What do you think?
Sure thing. I think that, like all things, it's quite a complex subject, and it's as deep as we want to go. And so I said that if you give me half an hour, I can take a new person who's never held a camera and I can turn them into a photographer, but at a surface level. What I was really talking about is not their technical ability, not their ability to present what they see in their mind's eye. That they might not be able to do that within half an hour, but what they may do is pick up what I'm putting down. The reason to pick up a camera is ... and explain that to them and see where that goes. And so I think that photography is many, many, many things to many people. To your specific question, I do believe that, like having a sniper eye as an example, first of all, that doesn't make me a great photographer. What that does make me is someone who's trained. So it's like taking a photography course 101, except I didn't have to pay the camera store or Vistec or name a big company out there that does photography courses. I've never had to pay for a course because I was formally trained by the military to some degree. I know how to use my skeletal system to support my camera to create a precise shot. I know how to control my breathing. I understand micro and macro vision. I understand how to hold long focus. I understand a lot of things from my military days, but I was never formally trained as a photographer. And so the reason I raise that is because anyone out there who thinks that they might be interested in photography, you don't have to read all the books. You don't have to talk to all the people. You don't have to take all the courses to just take a camera and apply passion against your new hobby and see where it takes you. But it is helpful if you get some formal training. As an example, back in the day when I first picked up a camera, if I could have talked to Tanya or if I could have talked to Pat, my photography would be better now. And I want to take my 40-year plus timeline of photography and say that it's a body of work that I've learned a lot. But guess what? Just a few years ago, in fact, it would have been 2-3 years ago, Tanya, I was talking to you about, what camera to get. I was thinking Sony. I was thinking this. Maybe I'll do this. Then I'm going to be king of the hill. And so I had lots of questions for Tanya. And the reason that I was bouncing a lot of questions off of her is because I'm an amateur photographer, not a professional. And so I was approaching my amateur photography as a professional mindset. But Tanya has been in that professional game, much like Pat, way longer than I have. So I learned a few things along the way, but I am always keen to sit down with someone who has new experiences or deeper experiences in photography so that I can learn from them. In other words, I'm 40 plus years in and still treating it like a beginner, still pursuing my craft, still quote unquote trying to be a professional. And I think that should be the case for everyone.
Pat, you got any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I guess, and I don't know if it's because of the level that I've gotten to, and when I look back I kind of see it a different way now. Because I'm gonna be a bit snobberish here, because like everybody can take a photo, right? And there's a lot of people that take snapshots, like Sean was saying, they're on a vacation and they just snap, 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 snap. There are others that have a natural art inside them that see a particular moment or thing that they want to capture, whether it's technically correct or not. you know, there was something interesting and something, cool to take at that moment. And they are focused there. And that's where I was talking about earlier about, that decisive moment and being able to start to enter the craft of photography. So, I mean, for me, it was an interesting progression. I've been shooting a lot. I started shooting film as well. And, out of a roll of like 24, there might be like two bangers in there. And I'd be like, yes, I'm like, that's such a cool photo. And, I'd have to try to rewind my brain to remember how that worked out. Right. And then the world of digital came along and I started shooting, and it was interesting because it's almost a progression. I was never a sniper, but I will use the analogy of it. So like you kind of go from like being like an infanteer to a marksman to a sniper, right? And so I see that in the same way in photography. You kind of go from like being, someone taking snapshots to being a shooter to being a photographer. And I think there's like a bit of we kind of blanket that term, but in my brain and at my level, a photographer is someone that can actually see the moment, capture the moment, use the tool to actually um, create that actual thing to then present to the world. And so I guess I have a bit of snobbery there. Everybody's a photographer, and I encourage everyone to start shooting. And if that interests you, and you start to look back at those photos and be like, that was rad, and I really love that photo. Start deconstructing it. Start diving in a bit to the skill. You don't have to go crazy like I have, or like some of us have, getting formal schooling or shooting all the time, but ask yourself, why did that photo work, right? And that can actually bring you a lot of joy. I'm starting to ramble, so
I like it. I like it. I'm learning
yeah.
so much from this. When we started and I said I am a complete noob, I am 100% a complete noob. So I am digging all of this. Tanya, you got any thoughts at all?
Yeah, I agree with both these gentlemen here, and I think that seeing is an innate skill that we all have. It's just some people see differently or see more closely than others, right? They notice because for me, photography is it's the art of noticing. And like Sean was saying, a lot of people don't have that intentionality and when how they go about the world, and they'll just take photos of whatever, and they don't, yeah, they just don't put that much thought in composing the shot. So I think everyone has it, and then like PJ was saying, that you go from one level to another level to another. And I imagine it's the same for military. Like in the beginning, like as a photographer, the keep versus toss ratio is very one-sided for a very long time. And it takes a long time, especially for me. I do a lot of MMA style photography. So action shots are, your keep toss ratio is very one-sided, and it's very hard to get the right shot. But when you do, you start to deconstruct it, and you start to just figure out how it why it works. And I'm kind of in between, because there's a lot of formal things like the rule of thirds and all these other things that will increase your chances of a better like a more effective shot. But there's still also like this intangible quality to what makes a great shot sometimes, that I imagine that's the emotional component. And that's why photography is like this really cool melding of art and science. It's like the mind, it's the head and the heart. And there's, I don't think my skills would transfer over to being a sniper very easily, but there was actually a surprising amount of crossover in terms of, again, noticing things. And then when I was taking a shooting course, the shooting positions, I was like, oh, those I've done all of those positions. Sean was saying, using his skeleton to support the camera, and I was like, oh, I've done all of those. It's just with the different apparatus in my hand. So that kind of just brings me back to the beginning, where I think it's the refinement of like an innate human skill. That's what photography is.
I'm digging this. We got a question on the Instagram side here from Abstract Karma. It says, does anyone here take a photograph to examine it and draw observations from it? And I thought that was a great segue into what exactly we want to do today. So I have 3 images from both Pat and Tanya, and we're going to take a look at some of these images in a minute here and pick them apart and see what makes them interesting to us and where our eye goes. But before that, I had a quick question for you guys. Before I want to jump into this. So Tanya, you were saying, the art of noticing things, and that your initial ratio is going to be one-sided, heavily to discard. Do you find that as you got better, you took less photos, or was it that you were so intent on capturing a particular moment that you just sought to take better photos? If that makes sense. What do you think?
I would say the answer to that is yes, to both, in the sense that once I started getting a feel for what worked and what didn't in MMA photography, I began taking less photos. And then once that ratio started, I wouldn't say it's at parity, but it's getting closer and closer. Then I went to the next level and just started getting even choosier, trying to be much more discerning of those moments. And so, yeah, that would be my take on it.
Interesting. Pat, what are you thinking?
Yeah, it's interesting. I agree with both of them as well. And it's funny too, because when I got into drift photography, in particular, I had to have a Sony A9, and most people probably don't know what that is, but that thing could take 20 frames a second. And I was like, I have to have this camera. You know what I mean? Because it's going to be so fast. And yeah, it was funny because I ended up, I think I took 20 frames a second for about the first 3 weeks that I owned that camera. And then I realized that, what am I doing? I mean, I ended up with hundreds of photos and not really what I wanted. And I think the fastest that I shoot when I shoot drift is, because I see what I want. And so I had to start adjusting my camera settings. So at first I'm shooting 20 frames a second. I have a super high shutter speed. Everything's coming out laser crisp. There's no motion. It looks like the car's parked on the track. And I'm like, what am I doing? And I had to start thinking about what I actually wanted to see, what I wanted to translate, what I wanted to show in this photo. I wanted to show speed. I want to show the intensity of the smoke, all those things. So then I would drop my shutter speed all the way down to like 1/30th of a second. And people may not understand what that means, but it's a much slower shutter speed. And I would pan the car. Because if I just took the picture, the car would be blurry. So I'd pan the car, so everything would blur behind it. The smoke would be super, and then I was starting to get what I wanted. So now I'm taking only 8 frames a second. Now I'm at the point with the race I just shot. I still ended up, after almost 2 weeks of shooting, probably 5,000 photos. But I was only on single fire. I was like on single shot. You know what I mean? I was no longer in, automatic mode, like machine gunning everything I've seen. It was click, 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 click. I want that, and some worked out, some didn't.
Interesting, Sean. Thoughts?
Yeah, so I'm going to use... So here's my Sony that I just bought in October. And I bought it just before we went over to Thailand for 6 weeks. It was a new camera to me. I had to figure it out. I just think of this as a tool, just like a weapons platform. It's like a 5.56 millimeter. It's like a 50 cal, whatever it is. It's just a platform for me. I have to learn the tool. So when I bought it, headed over to Thailand, initially I was shooting 500-600 photos a day. And that was on single shot. And that was on the shutter activation, not an electronic shutter, but the mechanical shutter. And so everything was single shot, everything was mechanical shutter. And I'd see a dog, bam. I'd see a house brick, bam. I'd see a sign, bam. I'd see a car, bam. I'd see a car antenna, bam. I'd see the driver, bam. anything that caught my eye, I was initially technically trying to understand the camera. But once I started figuring out how it all worked, what it was capable of to some degree, then I switched my focus, and that's no pun intended. What I did was shift from trying to understand the platform to then trying to feel the platform. And so that's an important distinction for me. And I'm going to try to explain that through a tiny little story yesterday. I was on my bike, ramming down some single track. As I was rounding a big corner in the frozen wasteland that I was out in, the sun was behind my back, and I swept around the corner. I thought, oh man, I bet that light behind me is good. It feels good. So I locked up the brakes, jumped back, looked at my 6 o'clock, and saw what I felt would be a good photo. So I jogged up the single track, dropped down into a shooting position on one knee, and started scanning the single track to see what I felt. Not what I saw, it's what I felt. And then for the next 15, 20 seconds, I composed my photo based on feeling, not on the technicality of my platform, because I learned that in the first week or two of owning it. Now my focus is on feeling the photo. So sometimes I don't even know what the photo is going to be. I just feel that it's going to be a good photo. Then I immerse myself in the moment, and then I just let the moment unfold into the photo that gets created. And so I don't see something, decide that's what the photo is going to look like exactly, and then try to make the photo look like what I see in my mind. What I do is I feel the moment and try to cooperate with the moment. And then I guess it's kind of like roasting coffee. I'm not roasting the coffee to create maybe the best cup of coffee. I'm roasting the coffee to represent the coffee, whatever that means to anyone out there. So it's a long considered practice that has got me many years later to, mostly in my life, I just feel my way through life. I'm not trying to set the f-stop. I'm not trying to set the shutter speed. All of those lessons were learned a long time ago. Now I'm just trying to feel the picture. The picture kind of shows up by itself if I disappear into the picture. I hope that makes sense.
Well, first off, speaking of coffee, I just want to say thank you. First, I got your coffee. I'm drinking the Kenyan right now. It is wonderful. I'm really enjoying this. But on a side note, I like the way you put that, in that you're seeking to flow in the moment, right? It's similar to shooting or martial arts or friggin' anything else you want to, if you can find the moment to just be a part of, I think is what we're talking about here. Pat, you got any points to add?
No, yeah, no, I mean, I have a couple of quick points to add, I guess, to that, because I completely agree with Sean with everything that he said. And he was talking earlier about the technical thing about learning the camera. So what I think the beauty of photography is, and I think a natural progression for a lot of people is to get to that, start producing really interesting images, is the thing I love about photography, that it is a very amazing mix of art and science. So like tech nerds, like we get to go all nerdy on our kit, and then we also have our artistic side. And where I'm going with this is that at first you might have like a natural eye for really good photos, and so you get so far with the iPhone, right? And I encourage people to use iPhones, and just, if that's what they want to do, shoot the hell out of your iPhone. In fact, Larry Chen, very famous automotive photographer, when he started Instagram, he said he wouldn't put up an actual picture out of his camera until he had 100,000 followers on his Instagram, and only shot with his phone. And so you can get very far. Then you add the technical, I guess, crux into it, right? But once you learn that, it becomes like a whole new palette of brushes. You've gone from like doing a pencil drawing to full oil art, full oil painting. Like, you have the full palette, and you can use that technical aspect to create really amazing things. So, I think it's a natural progression, and I think once you get hooked, it's a hard thing not to go way down the deep end. And you'll have that algorithm. You'll start out capturing images, and you'll be loving your images, and then you'll get your camera and you'll go full tech nerd, and then you'll realize you're not in the moment. right? And you're not capturing that moment. You're so focused on like, it's got to be a shallow F stop and I want it to be this and I want it to be that, instead of actually observing. I now shoot almost everything, I'd say a lot of things, with both eyes open, just like I did like shooting platforms in the military. You go from seeing it and like closing your eye, going through the viewfinder. But now I'm looking through the viewfinder and my left eye is open a lot of times because I'm tracking something, or I'm not seeing something more in the picture. And it's that extra camera in my head to create more, I hope, better images.
It's really quite interesting. I find I was talking about this on the mats the other day, was the fact that when you first start anything, you have to learn the technical skills behind it. You have to learn how to do A, B, C, and D. And then from then on, it's just how you mix those things together, how you apply those things, and the ability to actually let go. You have to kind of submit to the moment and allow for whatever to show up. And I think that's such a fantastic point. Tanya, you got anything before we jump into the photos?
Sure. I mean, I would say that's what style is once you have a solid technical foundation, now you're like, I'm going to start manipulating these variables my way. And I imagine it's the same with roasting coffee, or it's the same with being, shooting. You learn all of those techniques and have them become subroutines, as Sean calls it. And then once that becomes second nature, now you're like, okay, now I can, that almost having that technical skill takes some of the cognitive load off you. Once that becomes second nature, now you're like, I can be in the moment and yeah, just respond to the environment and adjust the variables that I've got in front of me in order to get the thing that I want. I imagine roasting coffee, while you may go in with one plan, one idea as to how you want this end result to be, sometimes the beans might be telling you something different, and you have to respond to that. Whereas I think, any sort of white belt or beginner, they'll try to force a round peg into a square hole and not be able to respond to the situation and to adjust what needs to be done in order to get the most successful result, even if that's not the result that you think, that you had in your head originally. I mean, that happens all the time in jiu-jitsu, happens all the time in photography. Is sometimes what you actually needed is not what you wanted in the first place. But and then that leads into something like where professionals versus amateurs, the ability of a professional is to bridge that gap, between what you envisioned and what you ended up with. It's always about closing that gap in order as much as you can, despite being a flawed human creature.
I like that. I think it reminds me of the difference between baking and cooking, right? Baking is a science. It's very specific. You have very specific additives you need to add. You put it in the oven for a specific amount of time, at a particular temperature. The result will be X. You'll make a very nice bread. But to be able to cook is something different. You have to be able to feel that moment and do something interesting. What do you got, Sean?
So that is a great example, great analogy. And I'm going to throw this out because it's something that I observed about myself in Thailand when I was shooting with the new Sony. I wanted to, of course, learn the platform, but I do like to push my envelope. So I was taking all kinds of photos, and pretty quickly, like I do like street photography. Pretty quickly, I realized that, man, there's a boatload of people over here in Thailand that are all up in my grill all the time. There's a lot of people like standing within feet of me. And so I'm going to start taking photos of people who are up real close. And so what I could have done in that moment is I could have gone to electronic shutter, which for everyone out there, if you're not familiar with that, means that I get to take my photo silently, like I've got a suppressor on my weapon. But what I did was I removed my suppressor and I went full loud. And so if I was 3 feet from anyone, I'd be taking a photo and it'd be like this. Like you could hear it a mile away in that person's face when I was right in front of them taking that photo. And I would get all kinds of reactions. And what I found fascinating, this is my own personal observation, is over the course of a few days, it wasn't that other people had to get used to me taking noisy photos of them up close. What I had to do was get used to doing it. And so I had to find ways to be Coolio like Fonzie in the moment and not get away with it, but make it cool for the other person. And so I shot thousands of photos of people over there that I would say a third of them probably weren't initially too stoked to get their photo taken. But it was those first few seconds of negotiating the cool moment or the uncool moment and turning it into cool that I got amazing photos. And so, like, I've got some freaking bangers, man, from over there with people that I don't know who they were. They don't know who I was. But me going fully loud and up in their grill, but in a cool way, is the difference between the cooking and the science of understanding how to cook. And so not just understanding the technical aspects and not just understanding the love of the cooking, but the understanding that no matter how good you are and how much you know and how much you can interact with the world, there's always a way with photography to make it more difficult, to make it more complex, to make it more learning. And so, like, I was full loud right up in someone's grill, taking a photo of their right eye, not their left eye, with a smile on my face, with a smile on their face. And really, the bridging of the gap in that moment is the human to human connection, which I find the opposite of the technical chase. And so that's just a thought.
I love it. The quick comment here, River Viking jumped in here, said, y'all are making me hungry. I'm starting to get hungry myself. Pat, you got any thoughts on what Sean just dropped?
Yeah, I'll hit on a couple things. So, like in any skill that we learn, we have that typical unconscious incompetence, right? And then you have your conscious competence, right? And in photography, that unconscious incompetence is a beautiful thing because that's where the spark gets born, right? And you just start taking pictures, right? So you have unconscious incompetence of actually being able to take a good photo, right? Or I shouldn't say a good photo. They're probably, with the right person, they are good photos, right? And then you hit conscious incompetence, right? And that's where we start to stumble because now the photos never work out and you don't know why, right? And then you end up in conscious competence, right? And then you're starting to fully nerd out. That's what I was talking about earlier. And then what we're talking about, like style and being in the moment again with your piece of equipment, is that unconscious competence, right? And that's where everything it started to become into a flow state, and that artistry starts to bloom even more. So you go from a spark almost to a frustration. And I'm just saying this only because I know that there's people out there that are going to pick up a camera, maybe they'll be inspired by this, and they'll be like, oh yeah, I got cool photos and I like cool photos. And then they'll go pick up a camera and then nothing will turn out the way they want. And it will just look flat and boring, right? And if they push through, they're going to end up starting to really enjoy it. Street photography is interesting because there's so many different ways that you can get out there. But Sean hit onto a really great point, is just going out and doing it. There will be a subconscious, or I've always had with street photography like this, I guess, I won't say insecurity, but a self-consciousness about holding that camera up and taking that photo. And it would make me miss many good opportunities. But there's ways around that too, right? Like a lot of famous street photographers, they just set their focus manually to 5 feet away from them or 10 feet away from them, focus on something else. And then when that person passed that light pole, they just go clack. You know what I mean? And they start to get really cool images. And there was another photographer. He'd pretend he didn't understand how his camera worked. That was his way to bridge that, that self-consciousness of standing there taking a photo of somebody in a crowded place. His shtick, and he's a very famous street photographer. It's on the tip of my brain, but he would act like he didn't understand his camera. He'd be like adjusting settings. He'd be like, I don't understand. And then he would be observing the world around him while he was pretending to mess with his camera. and then he would see that moment and boom, he'd take the shot, and he'd be like, and then he'd still act like, oh, what the heck, like it didn't work, right? And then that would take away the defensiveness of the people that he was taking photos of, and it was his way of observing the world and being, cool with it. Just
dipping into the moment in your own personal style, your own personal way. I think that's a beautiful thing to do, and I applaud someone that would take the time to recognize that taking photos of people on the street is going to make some people uncomfortable. I think that's, first off, good to do, but then to be able to play with the moment, right? To be able to play with your focus or wait for a timing or play with the moment a little bit. I think that's just a beautiful thing. Tanya, you got
oh yeah, well
any?
you have.
Sean?
Oh, sorry, I was
Go
just
ahead,
gonna
mate.
say. But then you also have the guys that are on the opposite end of it, and there's another famous street photographer. I'm totally blipping on my brain. Yeah, he is very famous because he would have these reactions on people, and he was the exact opposite. Almost, he purposely got in your face. He would run a flash off the camera, and he would literally like go straight into people's faces and boom and take a picture. He used to do it in New York. He's gotten in fights and everything. And this is like back in like the 60s, 70s, but very famous person. That, I mean, do you create art, at the cost of others? The way that we do it is try to be, an observer. And then there's others that, can be disruptive with it.
Yeah.
I'm going to throw a couple of examples here of operating in the middle between those two states of being like offensively up in someone's grill, poking them in the chest versus sort of a wallflower in the back shadows with the long lens capturing the photo. And so 2 moments in Thailand. One was thinking of Tanya. Actually, I was thinking of Tanya when I was doing it. I was at a live Muay Thai fight and spent the night there, about 3 hours of fighting, all ranges of technical abilities. And so initially I sat down. I bought myself a ringside seat, which wasn't overly expensive. Sat down and watched the first few fights. I was getting all the photos and I thought, oh, this is pretty cool. And I thought, screw this, man. I'm gonna be the press. I am going to like get right up in this thing. And so like I had my elbows on the canvas. I'm shooting through the ropes. I'm walking around like I own the place without irritating anyone. I just injected myself into the moment to see, quote unquote, what I could get away with. And I could get away with anything I wanted in that moment because what it does when you need to get those kind of photos is it pulls you into the moment. Like you can't hang back. You've got to be so in it that you kind of become the moment in a weird way. And so I really had to get up on the canvas for some of these photos. And same with of all things, I can't believe I did this. There was a big fashion show in Chiang Mai, huge fashion show. And so I started off kind of along the sidelines, getting some photos. I just kept getting closer and closer. And I thought, screw this, man. Like I'm going to get up on stage. So I stepped up on stage like I was press. No one said a thing. At one point, I could have been a model. I could have walked down the catwalk, I'm sure, but taken photos. Pretty sure. And no one would have said anything because I decided I was going to own my moment. Not own the show, but like have enough confidence and enough quote unquote credibility to belong where I was. And so don't ever hold yourself back as a new photographer thinking that, well, I'm new to this and I've got to like baby step my way in. Like aggressively step in. Just figure out the right balance between being a goof and being cool about it.
Tanya?
Yeah, I would definitely agree. There's a whole nother podcast within the conversation about ethics in photography, especially street photography. And yeah, there's a balance that needs to be struck. I mean, I don't know how helpful this advice is for new people, but if you can be like a 5'5" Asian lady, it really helps make people comfortable when you're doing street photography. Because I can get right into people's faces, and it, generally doesn't end in a fist fight. So, barring that, I found that yeah, being cognizant of the other person's humanity, and if they're feeling uncomfortable, see what you can do to make them, to through your body language or maybe through an interaction to get them to relax in front of the camera a bit more. There's some other ethics, like kids generally ask the parents, to, if you can take photos. There's some things to keep in mind, but I found that the key really is the human connection, as Sean was saying. If you have them become part of the creative process, you can actually have some fun with that person. And even if it's just on the street, even if it's just for a moment, if you include them in the process and through your behavior and your demeanor, like not regard them as some sort of zoo animal, I find that it also results in better photos, because street photography or portraits, it's about that connection between the photographer and the subject. And the better you connect, the more vulnerability, the more realness and humanity you can pull out of that moment. And I think that's one of the key reasons why people take photos, is to capture those moments of humanity.
And on your point, Tanya, just as an example, we'd only been in Thailand like a day in Koh Samui. We're down towards the waterfront and sitting down watching a young family with their little kid, and they're blowing big bubbles up into the air, and the kid was just having all kinds of fun. I looked over, said to the mom and dad, "Do you mind if I take a photo? I'll give you the photo. I'll show it to you, and I can send it to you right now." And so what I did was I took this and I plugged them together with a USB-C cable. And from the moment I took the photo, 2 minutes later, I was emailing them the photo. And so once they saw that I wasn't some creep who was just going to take a bunch of photos and use them, quote unquote, in other words, what I'd established was, I really love this moment. And if you're cool with it, I'll capture it and we can share it together. And so once they saw the image, the husband was like, "Yeah, I wouldn't mind a few more." I was like, "Done, let's do it." And so I said, "Don't you worry about, you don't have to do any jumping jacks or anything. You just keep on doing what you normally do in life. And I'll grab a few more photos and I'll shoot them your way." And so as I was getting up to leave, I hit send and said, "Enjoy the photos." I'll never see that guy again. I don't know his name, but I remember the moment. And it's because it was a shared personal moment with another person where it was kind of a give and take to some degree, but just in a cool way, not in an exploitative way. And so it's amazing how many small moments like that, Tanya, that I created just with a quick USB-C cable from camera to phone and straight to email or straight to DMing someone on Instagram with it. Man, I was making connections within 10 minutes of meeting a person. It was like we were old friends to some degree. And that is because I was demonstrating as a photographer that it wasn't just a one-way street, me taking.
I think this, I wrote down connecting to the humanity of the moment. And I think, to your point, Tanya, what you're talking about is key, is that we're, by engaging with the family or the person or in any way, you're connecting to the humanity of the moment. And I really like the terminology of the humanity of the moment, because images that I've seen that don't have that humanity in them are, as Pat said earlier, they're flat, they're boring, there's not a lot to it. But if you can connect to the human aspect, the human game in that is, I think, a big key to it. Now, I have a comment and a question, and then I want to hit some photos because I really want to get into the technical aspects of it. So on the Instagram side, Corbin Bobby jumped in here. He said, "Find the line with your lens, and the best thing about it, you already have the vision of what you are looking to project into that image itself, allowing others to analyze the why and what brought it." And I really like this idea, is that you're not producing for somebody else. You're creating the image that you like, and then it's up to other people to determine what they like in it or what they don't. What do you guys think on that one? Pat, I'm going to come to you.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you have to explain a photo, then you failed as a photographer, right? I think in a lot of ways. I won't say you failed, but you didn't achieve the idea of capturing a moment. And maybe the person extracts something that is different from what you actually intended. But if somebody can read a photo, I guess, to feel emotion and to feel that what's happening in it, then I think you've succeeded in photography. And so it is about, I get into, I guess, debates with videographers a lot because I do videography, but it's not my preferred method, right? And they're like, well, I'm a photographer, I just take 24 frames a second. And it's like, yeah, but if I've done my job right, I can tell a whole story in one frame. You can have a whole story in your head and you can extract all kinds of different things from that. Even if it wasn't from my initial creation, you could have your own interpretation. But if it creates that spark when you see a photo, be like, what's happening there? And this is what I think is happening. I think you've succeeded in a lot of ways as a photographer.
I'm down with that. Tanya, any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the most damning thing a photographer, a performance artist, a creator of any kind can hear is silence or indifference, right? Like if it doesn't elicit an emotional response in that person, then I didn't do what I set out to do. So yeah, I would say I completely agree, and I'm definitely on your side in regards to the videography and the photography divide or difference, I suppose.
They are very different things. I mean, it'd be similar to saying jiu-jitsu and wrestling are the same. I mean, technically speaking, they're both grappling, but they're not the same thing at all. Sean, you got any thoughts on this?
On photos and how they're received, there's probably a time when I cared. And it's not that I don't care now. So there's a difference between caring and don't care. What I am is I'm neutral on how people receive my photos or receive any art that I put out nowadays. And perhaps it's because frickin' Rick Rubin is all up in my melon. Rick Rubin is all about the make art for yourself. Don't make it for anyone else. They'll either pick up what you're putting down or they won't. Whatever, man. And so, like, I'm paraphrasing Rick Rubin, of course, but that's generally the approach that I've taken for some time now. Since I started tracking him, actually not too long into the podcast, I guess about a year and a half ago, people were accusing me of sounding like Rick Rubin. I didn't even know who he was, for goodness sakes. I've got his freaking book on my coffee table that I'm reading right now. And so I think it's a good influence, man. Create art for yourself, not for anyone else. Now, if that's the slogan on my t-shirt, then I've got to attach in brackets that, and also challenge yourself and challenge others. So I'm making the art for me, but if I'm going to make it for me, I might as well make it a bit of a puzzle for others. And so I'll shoot it the way I want to shoot it. I'll be happy with what I'm happy with. If I put it on social media, it's because I like it. And if no one else likes it, cool, whatever, man. But at the same time, I'm also going to try to throw a hook into someone's mind if I can. If I've got the option between no hook and hook, I'm always going to go with the hook. So I do it for me, but at the same time, I do try to add a little bit of a hook in for others.
This leads directly into what I want to get into, which is the photos that you guys sent. And I am psyched to get this started because I really want to see how you take these apart. And the first one I know is going to make Sean uncomfortable. So I'm just going to jump right into that one. Here we go. This is it. Beautiful shot. Sean and Seb and Tanya. I know this is yours, but I'm going to come to you last. So, Pat, what do you think?
Oh, it's a great candid portrait of the two of them. I mean, I think it's great. Like it creates like a really great moodiness. I love it. It seems like if I were to just look at this and not know either of these two people, they're in a serious conversation. It's intense. I love the moodiness. And since I know both of them, like, like it probably was an intense conversation, but or a really good one. But it's just I like it. I like it as a great candid and the light peeking behind Sean's neck there. I like it. I don't know. I can just, I'm having a hard time articulating my words at the moment. I mean,
All good. Tanya, that's high praise, I think, if Sean or if Pat's not saying
Yeah,
anything.
no, that's really kind. Thank you.
I like
I
it.
don't know if
Sean?
Sean's going next. Yeah.
Yep. Sean, what do you got? What do you think on this photo?
Well, of course, I was in the moment, so I need to separate myself from the technical understanding of how the photo was taken versus what I'm looking at right now. So if I look at it from a casual observer's perspective, i.e., not Sean, what I do see is a lot of emotion in there. There's a layer of unspoken description that has got nothing to do with the technical aspect, nothing to do with the technical lighting, the focus, the rule of thirds, none of that. This evokes a feeling. And it's, to me, the distinction between a good photographer and a technical photographer it's miles apart. A good photographer will be technical while still evoking the spirit of the moment. And I think that Tanya captured that spirit. And that spirit is something that is a longer descriptor than the actual technical descriptor of the moment. So to me, it's a high praise of a photo when the feeling that is evoked is a bigger descriptor than the actual technical aspect of things.
I really like that. And I do want to remind anybody that's watching right now, hit us up on the comments. Let me know what y'all think about the image itself, because I'd like to get your input as well. Tanya, what do you think on this photo? I know you took it, but what do you think?
So I chose this photo. Actually, for me, I've got my misgivings about the technical aspects of it, but I chose it because of the story behind it, and it's definitely lessons. There's a lot of lessons learned in the sense that when I went there to do this photo shoot uh, with Seb and Sean for the project, I was as sick as a dog. Like I was so utterly like stuffed up everything, and I was so sick that I actually ended up forgetting my flash equipment at home. And so the lesson here is that light is light, because Seb actually had these ring lights and had these random lights around, and I was like, okay, these are the tools that I've got. I had spent the time learning flash photography and how to shape light and just the general principles of it, right? So I grabbed them, set them up as best as I can, because some things just don't go the way you want, but you still have to make it work. And so I set them up. I got the rim lighting. I got I bounced them off of the wall, and I managed to coax some shots, some I'd say decent shots out of a subpar moment, so one of the lessons are don't forget your stuff, double check. And the other one is to really understand light, because that's what photography is drawing with light. It's understand light, and you can use a light source. You can use like damn near any light source to your advantage if you know how to use it, and to use it in order to shape, to sculpt the image into what you want. And the other reason I chose this is because you can see a lot of you can see the light stands, you can see the ring light, you can see the bounce light. I actually, in the wires and a lot of extraneous things. And it was kind of more of a behind the scenes shot, just to show that you don't need anything ultra fancy if you understand the principles of the thing decently enough. Like if I were to publish this, I don't know if I'd choose this photo, but I would crop it in. I'd cut out all these things, cut out all the extraneous elements. But I found it important to show this one, because then you can see kind of how the sausage is made. You can see how an image is built and how things are set up using relatively simple equipment.
I really like this photo, and I know when this happened. I know both people. I understand the moment that you were accepting, and while you guys were talking, I tried to remove myself from that knowledge ahead of time. And so what I see in this image with this removed is that it's it reminds me of like a mind meld, from Star Trek, of two minds coming together. And even the boom arms coming towards the computer, the flags working towards everything going to the center, in that this is a meeting of the minds. And I really, that's what it evokes in my mind from this image. And I love the fact that everything comes back into the center of it. And I just, technically speaking, at least from what I know, that's what I love about it. We have a comment on the Instagram side. Corbin Bobby here says, interviewer and friend waiting in quiet while the guest or friend focuses on projecting their answer. The strength of mind on the clock, capturing the depths of thought in a moment of silence. It's quite remarkable. I really like it. Any other thoughts on this before we move on to the next one? Anybody at all?
I was just going to say quickly that you know that's an excellent point. Like, you forget your lighting. Like, one of the key skills of a good photographer, in my opinion, is problem solving. Right? If you don't have the right, you feel you don't have the right lens, the right light, the whatever, you can still make it or capture it within the whole context of what you're shooting, right? And so, forgetting the lights did not hinder that photo in any way. In fact, it probably elevated it in the sense of using the lights that were there, creating a very moody, I was trying to think of the word, but yeah, it created a very moody photo with the nice rim lighting and all that stuff. So problem
Yeah.
solving is important. Yeah.
As it is in anything. I mean, really, if you get flustered from forgetting something or having nothing work, it reminded me of when we did Operation Pegasus Jump in 22, the first year there, and I was trying to do a podcast and nothing was working and things weren't recording, and Sean and Seth were just trying to keep me hydrated, and I was all messed up. And you got to be able to just go on the fly on this as well, be able to just figure out what you need to get done, what's the bare minimum, how do we get started, and I love it. Any other thoughts before we jump into another photo? No? All right, here we go. This one was one of yours, Pat, so let's take a look. I really love this photo, just so you know. Beautiful landscape. Let's get some thoughts. Tanya?
I'm not
first.
sure if you can hear me right now. I'm having some issues with my
Yep,
video
I
feed.
got you.
Okay, I'm frozen, but the audio's still here. I love it. It's such a impressionistic, painterly landscape, and landscapes they're my white whale. I haven't seemed to be able to find that key for them, so I really appreciate just the color palette and the rhythm of the stones, echoing the shape of the focal point, and it's just a beautiful, calming image.
I totally agree. Sean, any thoughts?
Yeah, these aren't my typical style of photos. And so I say that as the preamble because I don't want to drop immediately into, wow, that's so amazing. It is amazing. But I want to say something a little bit more than that. It's not been my forte because I've never played with it. I've never explored it. I've never really strived to capture images like this. I feel like it's not my jam. And I think that's an important thing to say out loud because I may never take photos like that. Maybe I will, maybe I won't. Interestingly enough, though, last night I was on the YouTubes and I was watching some time-lapse photography. I've forgotten the guy's name, but he's world famous, since passed away. And what he used to do is capture streets with like a 15-minute long time exposure. And what that does is it smooths all of the motion out. And so all the people walking through cities, they all disappear because of the time, that the amount of time that the shutter is open. So essentially they might look like ghosts moving through the city, or it might be nobody in the city because of the length that the shutter's being open. And so as I was watching that last night, I thought, man, like there's entire segments of photography that I've never even spent 10 seconds on to understand it because I feel like there's so much to explore. And so the moment that this went up, I immediately went to that video last night and thought, man, time-lapse photography, this isn't pure time-lapse, but there's some time-lapse in there. I really got to get into this game. So my first thought was not emotional. It was technical. And I didn't want to go straight into a technical breakdown without saying, wow, what a great photo. So you can see my dilemma. My little squirrel mind wants to understand how this was done, while at the same time, I'm squashing down the emotional response of, oh, that's so nice. So that's where my head is at. That's my first thoughts.
I'm digging it. We got a couple comments here from the Instagram side. Dan Cameron says, crazy. I was promoted at the Cape Horn in 94, and that's almost the exact view I remember in my mind. There you go. And then Slav jumped on here. He says, this evokes Viking landing point and the Savior walking on water. The color palette, multi-layered focus, a beautiful photo that leaves us with so many questions. Dun, dun, dun. Pat, what do you think?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you the quick story behind this. So I'm heading down to King of Hammers to shoot adrenaline and race and all that stuff and capture that sort of thing. But I had this mentality that like I'm going to go down on the coast. I'm going to get some good shots. I want to go to Yosemite. I wanted to go to Bandon Beach where this photo was taken. And I purposely left, I won't say super late at night, but late at night so I could drive through and land in Bandon Beach when the sun was coming up. And this is called Face Rock. And if you look at that rock and you see the face, you won't unsee the face. And I went down to the beach, the tide, like I timed everything. There was like a lot of technical little hurdles that I threw in there, right? I wanted to be there for sunrise. I had to have the tide out because I didn't want to be standing in water taking this photo. And I wanted to capture like the essence of Face Rock and isolate it. So yeah, it's a 30-second long exposure. First thing in the morning on the beach. The tide was coming in. At one point, the water was like washing over my tripod, and I got a very expensive camera standing on top of it. I didn't bring my robust tripod. I brought my travel tripod, so I'm worried that it's going to like sink in the sand in the middle of the exposure. So there's a bunch of technical things that I had to add into this to create the image that I wanted to experience. And this is actually raw. I haven't edited this at all yet. So this is straight out of camera. And I feel like I achieved exactly what I wanted. I wanted that face rock photo, and that just kind of, it looks like the dude's that, like, if you see the face, and it looks like he's just in the spa laying on his back, just enjoying. I don't know. I can't explain it.
It's almost got like a Monet sort of feel to it. The Monet was the first thing that popped into my head, I swear.
Yeah, I like it.
I think it really, especially with landscape, I think it brings to the forefront how much work goes into crafting a good shot. Because yes, often you get some spontaneous things, but with certain genres of photography, like I said, landscape, there's so much pre-planning. You check out the spot beforehand, you get to know the terrain, you get to know the timing. If you know all these things, if you take the time to get to know all of these things, including the technical, aspects of the camera, your chances of having an evocative, visually successful image increase by so much more, rather than just letting those things happen, like just being, rather than just, with not taking those factors in and just being a passive passive kind of photographer who just takes snapshots. There's a beauty in that, but I find that it does separate the pros from the amateurs, or from the hobbyists, is the amount of time, the preparation, essentially.
I'll touch on that for a second, quick.
Sure.
The fact, like, being in the military enhanced the chances of me getting this photo exponentially. The amount of map recce that I did, met rep I did, pre-planning, knowing what equipment I needed, tides in and out. I've never been to Bandon Beach in my life. I literally rolled up. I already had a full battle plan laid out in my head before I stepped out of my truck that morning and trucked down there and just found the framing I wanted and executed everything else that was in my basically in orders in my head. So there's a lot of transferable skills. I know a lot of photographers that go from military to photography. This is where they start, is in landscape, because they like to be out in nature, they like to be out there, and there's a lot of things that you can adapt from our world to it.
Yeah, absolutely. I have a quick comment on the Twitch feed here. Maple Glade says, "Hey, always great to find new photographers. How are things going? Where was this, and what did you shoot it with?" So technical aspects. What do you got?
So again, yeah, this is Banded Beach, Oregon. It's called Face Rock. It's quite photographed already. I'm sure you could Google image that pretty quick. I shot it with a 24-70. I was at 24 millimeters, 30-second long exposure. I had an ND filter on there, and yeah, that's about it.
Right.
And if you don't know what ND filter is, basically it's like dark sunglasses. So basically I had welding glasses in front of my lens to allow that exposure to be that long. There we go.
There we go.
Right there.
Sean's got one right there. Perfect. And then the River Viking jumped on here. He says, this photo makes me think about the journey it took to get this shot and how that might translate to other aspects of life. That's a good point in the fact of it's not something that you just kind of randomly stumbled upon, right? Like you had to intentionally go down there and, as you mentioned earlier, hit all of those markers, all those timings, stuff like that. I just love it.
Yeah, but I don't mind throwing this out there. So PJ captured that photo through a process that took many years to get to that point. However, if he didn't know all the things that he knew, and let's say it's the first time he picked up a camera and he got that photo quite by happenstance, by chance, and that's like his favorite photo ever. Now he's got the problem of trying to recreate it again with no knowledge. So he got lucky with his first ever photo, and then he's in the relentless pursuit of trying to meet that same high standard, quote unquote luck. And now he's in a pursuit that's shaped entirely differently. It's a pursuit that is chasing his first lucky shot of excellence. And so, man, photography can come about in so many different ways. PJ came through it like what I would consider to be a good way. But you can come about it so many different ways. Like there's many ways to skin a cat. And if you're a lucky noob who gets a freaking amazing photo and then spends the rest of their life trying to get to that same high level again, well, it's all the same game. It's all a pursuit. It's what motivates you, I think, is really the crux of this conversation. So what motivated PJ to take that photo? Why does he want to get better? Why does he want to push his envelope? That is really kind of what we're talking about, I think.
Mm-hmm. You got an answer to that, Pat?
Well, it's interesting. Like I find a lot of calmness and stillness in the ocean, and there was I've seen some of these images before, and it's not so much that I wanted to do a better shot than anyone else. I wanted my shot of that experience of being there, seeing it, and being able to take it. And I'll probably print this photo and put it up in my house because it will take me back to a sense of calmness. And it's one of the reasons I use the long exposure, is because it flattens everything out. It's kind of dreamy, and I can look at that photo and find a resonance of calmness in that image.
It's interesting that you say that the ocean is a calming thing, and you find stillness in it. In that it is a fluid environment, consistently fluid environment, and yet you find stillness in it. I just love that little piece there. Any other thoughts on that image before we got another one? All right, let's dive right into this. This one is Sean's. He just sent this to me, and we're going to put it up. Here we go. And we're going to talk about it. Tanya, what was your initial thought right off the bat?
What's the story behind this? In the best way possible. It's intriguing. Like that man looks like he's got stories. This image has a story behind it. And that's the hook that keeps me looking through this image. So I can't wait to hear it.
All right, Pat, you got any initial thoughts?
Yeah, I agree with Tanya on this one. It's story on story on story. Like it's so multi-layered, because the intensity of him looking at Sean, his whole get up and vibe, and the fact that he's holding, newspaper of stories. It definitely is like, what's going on there? Like, yeah, I love it.
Layered.
It's a great street food. Yeah, it's so layered.
I love it. We got a comment from the Instagram side. Abstract Karma says, this strikes me as a very deep photograph with a lot of layers. So, Sean, you want to enlighten us a little bit?
Yeah, sure. That's why I love this photo, is because of all of the layers. I mean, you can go 27 layers deep and there's still a story at level 27 for sure. So how it kind of came about was I was walking down the street with Doreen. This was in Chiang Mai. And I saw a guy about, one tactical bound ahead of me. He had his back towards us. He was on the street. He's a homeless person or a street person. And he had his shopping cart, and he had all kinds of things in it. And he was actually he had my radar going. Red flags were popping off as I started walking towards him. So much so that Doreen was on my left side, and I switched spots to go onto the left side. So I was the closest one to him as we were about to walk by. So I was definitely eyeballing this guy from a feel perspective. So as I walked past him, I kind of gave a little bit of a side glance to see what his state of mind was, and he caught my eye. We shared like a millisecond of time together, and I knew that he was going to be okay. I knew that it was going to be a good moment for the two of us. I didn't know what the moment would look like, but I knew we were about to share some time. So I kept on walking by, and I said, I'm just going to take a quick photo. So I turned around and I caught his eye again, and he caught my eye, and we never spoke a single word to each other. I just grabbed my fat camera, pointed it, and I said, and he nodded his head, and I thought, okay, I'm about to set up the photo. And he started scrambling around in the shopping cart, and he pulled out this big rolled up newspaper, and he unfurled it and held it up like this was a really important moment for him. He was trying to tell me his story through the story on the front page. And again, no words exchanged. And so really what I tried to do was not take a technical photo. What I tried to do was tell his story, the story that I didn't know. So I had to like be in it with him to capture something that I didn't understand through his backstory. But I was trying to sort of freeze a moment in time to tell a story I didn't know. And it was after the fact that I looked at the photo and tried to, much like all of us right now, try to understand all the stories within this story. And I could probably look at this a year from now and still think about it and still have questions and still answer more questions. And so I feel like it's a pretty deep photo that maybe no one will ever understand, you know?
There's you got a bunch of comments actually on the Instagram side here. People are all over it. Corbin was jumping in. He says, we want to zoom in and decode the moment. Abstract Karma says, love that the back is blurred as he was trying to communicate. And I really love the depth of it, the depth of field as well, because it really draws you beyond just the face value of the image itself. I really, really quite enjoy it. Any other thoughts on this before we move on? All good. All right, let's jump into what do you got, Tanya?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that this is a great example of two things. One is what we previously talked about was that it's more fun and you generally get more intriguing, beautiful results when you have the person be in on the creation of the image. You know, you could have just exploitatively taken a photo of a homeless person and made it tell your narrative, but instead you essentially collaborated. He wanted to tell his story, and that is one of the wonderful, like, powerful things about photography is that you can give people a chance to tell and express their story, right? And the other thing I wanted to bring up is I have found that having a camera in my hand changes the dynamic of a situation. Sometimes it can cause the other person to freeze up, but they see me and they profile me and they have their read. And then once they see the camera, it puts you almost in a position of power or authority because I don't know, you're capturing a moment, and now whatever they're doing in that moment, you have the ability to share it with the world, whatever that may be. And that's something to keep in mind, to honor, and to just be aware of, because it's an interesting thing to have noticed, especially with me as a woman, excuse me, as a woman who goes to martial arts gyms. People are very kind and polite, but there tends to be a dynamic change once they see the camera in my hands, because now it becomes something. Now I have a story, and my story is that I tell stories, right? And so there have been interesting connections and collaborations that have come from just a simple, overpriced piece of plastic and glass in my hands.
This is it's a very interesting point. It made me think of hunting, actually. A quick comment. Corbin jumped on, said it's an entanglement. Also, you're entangling yourself beyond not just the physical aspect of it. And then Dan jumped in here and says, and you don't get these photos without the trust of the subject. You don't get that without being truthful of who you are to begin with, which is a beautiful way to put it. What it made me think of was, Tanya, you said puts you in a position of power when you pull the camera out. And I think because the camera itself, it's an instrument of taking. Like, you would take a photo, right? So you would just take something out of the world rather than share it with everybody else, but to humanize the moment. When I'm out hunting, I don't just want to kill an animal. I want to harvest, and I want to share it, and I want to engage my family and my community with it rather than just take something out of nature. And I don't know. What do you guys think, Sean?
I just want to change the word, the power. And so I understand the spirit of what Tanya's saying, and I agree. And I've seen it many times myself. However, for anyone who's listening, don't think of the camera as a power. Think of it as a tool that changes the relationship instantly. And so as the relationship changes, just like the homeless individual that I took the photo of, or, a tree that I take a photo of later today, it's the relationship in that moment. It's not a power tool. It is just it's an activator to demonstrate what is really happening in the real time. So when you pull that out, if a person's face collapses or it beams up or it goes neutral or it goes stern or whatever it is, whatever that person gives you, that is through not the power of the camera or the power of the person. It is through the perception of the moment of what does this mean to me now? The person who's about to have their photo taken, the camera comes out, and the first thing that typically runs through their mind is, I better stand up taller, or I better smile, or I wish I had to put on more makeup, or I better straighten out my hat, or I better spit out my chewing tobacco, or whatever. Like, the tool creates a change in most people, and it's that change that is the power. And so the change can be good or bad. It can be truthful or not, but the camera will if you've got a keen eye, the camera will show you what's actually going on in the real time, depending on how closely you observe.
Yeah, if I may, I guess, piggyback on that, I appreciate the verbiage refinement, and upon thinking about it, I find it's perhaps, power isn't the right word, but there's now a label on the relationship in a sense, because when you have a camera, the person, place, or thing you're photographing becomes now the subject, and it can be very jarring. It can be very, some people, like you said, start smiling, some people freeze up. I think it's because now with a camera in my hands, I now have captured a moment, and I think it can cause a reaction in people when an individual has the ability to control or shape a narrative in the way that they see fit. Like when I have the camera, I can tell a story with one photo. Like say an MMA person, like they could be doing really well throughout the sparring round, but then I'll take that one photo of where they're getting, punched in the face. And if I only share that one photo, then that can be the narrative that gets disseminated. And while not to make it too heavy, but I find that there is a responsibility I have in what I share or how I interact with the person that can really well, I'm losing my train of thought, but that really shapes the relationship, and it can be really integral into building trust with the person you're photographing.
So as a photographer, I'm trying to capture the moment, not capture the future. And so the story that I'm telling is the story of the now, not what someone will interpret years from now in their MMA career, and how I, Sean, dissed them by not taking the best photo of them not getting punched in the face. So if I only take one photo of a person and it's them getting punched in the face and they take offense to that, well, that moment happened. And I'm capturing that moment, and the moment is what it was. And then it's now on the observer, it's now on the person to work through that. And if they feel like the only photo that I ever took of them was them getting punched in the face, and how somehow that is not true, that's for them to figure out, not for me to figure out. And so I'm not actively walking around trying to make anyone look bad. I'm trying to capture the essence of the moment. The trick is then the person who got captured has to work through that psychologically. I don't have to work through it psychologically. That other person does. Now, where it becomes really interesting for me as a photographer is if they choose to work through it with me, like days later. Hey, when you got that photo of me getting punched in the face, I want to talk to you about that. Okay. Well, now we've got great photography and with great conversation. I think where it falls apart is if you capture a moment and if someone takes offense or defense or it's good or it's bad, but then keeps it to themselves, well, that's on them, not on me as a photographer. I'm not trying to be callous or not trying to ram it down anyone's throat that I'm just going to take photos anyway, so forget about it. I don't care what you think. That's not what I'm saying. I want to be cooperative. I want to be in the moment with the person, but the moment happened. And so many years later, it's for them to figure out.
Abstract Karma jumped in on the Instagram side, said, I like that. It is the now. And I think that's a key point to what you're saying, Sean, is that the moment is like that did happen. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. You can't say, well, I didn't get punched in the face, because obviously it did happen. So I think it's a great point. Pat, you got any thoughts on this?
No, I agree with everyone. I don't really have anything to add on that.
Bam. I like it. Then let's hit another photo here. This one is one of Tanya's. And so, Pat, I'm going to come to you first on this one. Here we go. Let's take a look at it.
Amazing.
What do you think?
I think this was actually in the moment. That's, I guess, the question.
Yeah. I get right up in people's grills when they're sparring.
Yeah, no, that's great. Dude, this is it's very cinematic. I think, it's an intense photo. I love it. The lighting's great. The expression is great. The crop is great, super tight in like that. You can see the exhaustion, all that stuff. It looks it's either a real time moment or it's a really good actor in a movie. That's the vibe I get from it. Something at a Fight Club, but not it's a real moment. That's why I had to ask, because it's just, yeah, well, yeah. I think that's a great portrait. I love the candid portraits. Yeah. But this one's very cinematic.
This was, I think, one of the favorites that I had out of all the photos that you guys have done. So I really want to talk about it. Sean, you got any thoughts on this?
Yeah, he looks familiar. Is that Johnny? Yeah, okay.
Johnny Walker.
Yeah, Johnny Walker. Yeah. So it is a fantastic photo. And what I find particularly interesting from a technical aspect is that he probably wasn't holding that position for 10, 15 seconds. But it probably also wasn't a half a second moment either. It looks to me like he was probably there 5, 6 seconds. And so I don't know if you were already positioned there or if you had to shift left or right to some degree to grab that moment. So this is the way my brain's thinking. Either you got really lucky and were exactly in the spot that you needed to be to take that photo, or more likely, you had to make a step or two to get the photo or shift your lens enough to get the photo that you did it right because you didn't interfere with him. You didn't interfere with the moment. You were there in the moment, getting the moment without overlaying yourself in the moment. Otherwise, he would have glanced down at you. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been focused. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been in his moment. He would have been in your moment. And so to me, what it demonstrates technically as a photographer, you the photographer, is your ability to be in it without interfering in it. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah.
I'm digging it.
Yeah.
What do you
No,
got, Tanya?
I'm trying to think back to this photo. I'd say, I mean, absolutely. I found myself drawn to candid shots, and if I can blend into the background and people don't even know I'm taking photos, then I've done what I set out to do. And in regards to luck, I would say I was able to be lucky because I spent so much time preparing. So it was shot at TriStar. I know this gym well. I know the times of day. I know the places because I've just done, I think, like 300,000 shots just around that place for a few years now. And I know exactly where I need to be to get the type of shots that I want. And so I've been able to generate my own luck in that sense of being in the right place at the right time at the right round through a lot of preparation and, taking countless photos. So, yeah, I'd say that'd be the answer to that question.
I do have a quick technical question though. So I'm seeing the cross hatching on his face. Is that you shooting through the cage?
Yep.
Or is that light hitting the cage and then throwing shadow on him? So are you getting the actual cage itself in the foreground, or is that shadow of the cage in the?
Yeah, that's actually the cage because I'll
Right.
sometimes I'll just
Because you have to stop.
stick my
Right.
camera right up against the cage and take some
Yeah.
photos.
That's cool. I love it.
I really enjoy this photo, and I the little things that I noticed, and again, I am a noob, so I just want to state that if I'm incorrect in any of this, let me know. But I love the fact that just the hint of light in the hair on his face, everything draws the attention directly to his eyes, and I just love the moment there of focused exhaustion, I guess, is what I'm getting out of it, and I love every bit about this. We got a couple comments on the Instagram side. Abstract Karma says it is a brief moment of collecting their thoughts in order to regroup and get back in the ring on the mats. Corbin Bobby then says the shadow lines on the wall hybriding on his right arm. Just love it as an all. Yeah, I'm digging it quite a bit. Any other additional thoughts, Tanya? What do you got?
Yeah, just thank you. And I found that, like I'd said in the opening, is that I like the moments between the moments. As much as I love the epic, showed photos of people Superman punching and doing all these action shots, what I tend to post or what I tend to draw and what I'm drawn to are these moments where they're exhausted and they're trying to, get themselves to get up and do another round, or even the funny moments. Actually, my favorites are the moments after training is done and they're goofing off, or just these strange things that happen. And I, as much as I appreciate the compliments people give me, the best and my favorite compliment I ever received is from, he's like a musician, artsy, not MMA guy. He's just like, I don't know anything about MMA, but what I was surprised to learn is how many smiles there are in an MMA gym. And that actually really resonated because I was able to show people what I saw and how I saw these fighters, and that it was in a way that's different than how the rest of the world, looks at these people. And if I can do that, even once, then I can die happy. But I mean, I'll be chasing that dragon for the rest of my life. But yeah.
Chasing that dragon. I love it. Any other thoughts before we jump into another photo? Good to go. All right. Pat, this is one of yours. Here we go. Let's take a look at it. I really dig this one. This is super cool. Sean, let's start with you. What do you think?
Yeah, that's a good one. That is, let me quickly technically analyze it. I'm seeing the same individual, two different moments reflecting their past and present, probably. It is a highly technical photo. I'm actually drawn more to the technicality. Like, it's got my brain working at a technical level now, more than a emotional level, which I find interesting. I'm puzzling to see my technical mind is trying to see where the split is between the two individuals and how they got folded in there. I'm at a loss for words on how that was created technically. I think I've got an idea, but it's beyond me. So frickin' shoot up the fireworks.
Bam, you stomped him. Well done. Tanya, you got any thoughts?
No, I dig it. I think that it's a really illustrative, it's narrative driven, and it really exemplifies like how photography can be about capturing the moment, but it also, like any media, it can be used to express different things. So like in this case, it's doing something that I think only it can do while borrowing from different mediums. So this is more like, to expound on that further, it's like painting. It's a painting, but a painting wouldn't do this as effectively as a photograph, if that makes sense. You need the photography component of this, and I really like it. I like the way they just pop out from the foreground, and I like how you've controlled the tonal elements, the silhouette, the colors, in a way that it shows the level of consideration that separates like a professional from someone, a hobbyist, because I can imagine this took a fair bit of prep work to do. So I can appreciate it on a number of different levels.
And so on a number of different levels, like why I was almost tongue twisted initially within the first few seconds is because my brain, my perception of the moment was struggling to decide. And this is the technical photographer in me. Not like I have the place to make these decisions, but my brain was like, I don't know, hang on a sec, Pat. Why didn't you highlight the other side of that guy's face? Why the right side of his face and not the left side of his face as he's holding the weapon up in the air? It would have been really interesting to my mind if the other side of his face was lit up. But hang on a sec. Then I started working technically on where the light was coming from and why you chose what you chose. And so I devolved immediately into a technical analysis of how was this done. But it was the very first striking moment of why on that side of the face and why on that side of the face. And then I just started spooling out into my own little rabbit hole of what's up here. And I think that's the fascinating part about photography is, as a beginner or as a seasoned observer, we're all going to see different things in that image. And some will see just big and some will see tiny. But that contextualization of why this, if this, then that, is what is the mark of someone who has a curious mind. So if you just looked at that image and thought, oh, that's kind of neat, and then move on to the next photo, your mind isn't curious enough. But if you immediately start wondering. Now you're going to become a photographer. I hope that makes sense.
We got a number of comments here, and I just want to touch on my thoughts on this before I jump into them. But the thing that caught me through this whole image is the sand at the base of the boots there. And I don't know why that's what caught me, but it made me think of, the song Dust in the Wind, in that this is a memory. It's an ephemeral thing. It's fleeting. As it is a reflection, right? And the fact that when he moves or he changes the way he looks, that image, that memory will shift and fade, and it'll flitter out like dust in the wind. And I really like this shot as well. Pat, you want to hit us up with some thoughts on this before I get into the comments?
I just actually wanted to say,
yeah, what do you got,
sorry to
Tanya?
interrupt. It's that, again, it's another sign of the amount of consideration that the fact that you brought sand on set somewhere, while setting up the shoot in order to literally ground the image. Like, that is a really nice touch that I think, it deserves to be called out and commended.
Bam. Pat,
And
thoughts?
so, hang on a
Sean,
second.
what do you got?
Because how I interpreted it was, I'm on a very small screen on my laptop right now, so I don't have like a massive my 32-inch monitor to analyze, but I see it as this. That's the same individual in two different phases of their life. And those two photos were taken at two different times. And so the individual who's standing on the sand, that is being, and I'm going to say it loosely, photoshopped in. So that is just like the simplest way of saying something highly complex. That is being photoshopped in. And that's why my brain instantly went to, the lighting on this side of the face and that side of the face. What would I have done if I photoshopped this in? What, blah, 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 whatever, all the technicalities. And so my comment still stands. No matter who you are, if you're a beginner or not, there's something in this image. If you have a curiosity, you're going to be wondering, how was this done? Where was this done? Why was this done? Why the light? Why the thing? Why is there a house in the back? All the stuff.
All the stuff. Pat, what do you think?
Yeah, so I'll give you context on this so that you understand. I mean, hopefully it translates, and I think you guys kind of hit on it that it did translate correctly. So this is an example of a commercial shoot that I had to do, and it's a recruiter that is looking to recruit ex-special operations officers into high, we'll call C-suite roles, like COO, CEOs, all that stuff like that. And it was kind of like the gist. They gave me quite a bit of artistic leeway. And there was actually a caption above it that actually says, like in the actual ad, it says, "You can't turn it off and we don't want you to," right? And the idea is that he's looking back on his past life, that this is now a COO or CEO. But when he looks at himself in the reflection, he sees himself as what he was. And it was a very fun shoot to work on, a great production shoot to do and have that artistic leeway. So the one shot is actually out on there's like a big kind of like sand dunes out here in Richmond. Set up lights and the whole bit, got him in the full setup and kit up, and I won't lie, I did it guerrilla style. I didn't get proper permits and stuff like that, and luckily he put all this kit away when the security guard had come along, because it's actually owned by the ports, the area that I did it in, and luckily he had put all this kit away just as he was humping up the hill to jack us up to not be there, and he was back in his civilian clothes. And then I actually guerrillaed the second part. This is down at Canada Place in Vancouver, because I wanted that large office building kind of skyscraper kind of look of the painted glass, and he's reflecting back on who he was. And that's the other reason, because I had an image where they would have been looking at each other, but because of the ad and what I wanted to translate, I wanted him to be looking at you, right, in the reflection, right? And so that's why I picked some of those things. Yeah,
I love it. This is just awesome. Now I just want to hit on a couple comments here that we were talking about on the people we're talking about on the Instagram side here. Abstract Karma jumped in and said, "This is very artistic, and I love the creative aspect of the two versions of the same person. A reflection that displays the inside, not the outside. Dan Cameron jumped in and said the duality of humanity, and I really like that too. Is that it can definitely dive into that. Abstract Karma jumps back in. It's also the inside, not the outside, like how a coin has two sides. And then Corbin jumps in here. He says the NVGs were not in perfect detail. That's why I'm thinking that you merged your real shots with AI. But I don't know if you actually pulled that off. Did you?
That is a Photoshop composition. He's wearing nods and all that stuff like that. I did try to, like, if you want to get technical into the Photoshop and composition kind of things, it's a reflection, right? So I didn't want it tack sharp in the reflection. I wanted it to, because there is some already other reflections and I guess we call grain in the window glass. So I did like use Gaussian blur a bit to kind of feather the image so that it and you can actually tell the difference that, like, or I wanted it to be that you could tell the difference that one is a reflection and one is in real time. And so that's what I was achieving, but definitely not AI. That's insultive, and I take offense.
Hey, I'm curious, Pat, on your when you were putting that together, you could have had them both look at each other, or as you have already explained, have the individual look directly at me, the observer. So you chose to have him look directly at me, the observer, and whereas you could have had the two dudes looking at each other. Why did you choose what you chose? Because both could work. Him looking at himself, or what you chose, the old him looking at me.
Yeah, so I had both. I compiled both. I did a composition of both of them, and what I came up to within my mind and what sold with the client was the fact that, you know, I'm trying to recruit you, right? This is the recruiting poster, remember? So I'm trying to recruit you. So I want that old one looking at, you know, the ex-operator or ex-special operations officer, you know, that could be in those C-suite positions, right? I want that intensity to be looking at him like he could be, like, it creates a triangle. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. It creates a triangle.
That's great. I love it.
Yeah.
Beauty. Quick comment here. River Viking said cliche, but this picture is worth greater than 1,000 words. I would agree. Absolutely. And then he goes on, he says, every veteran will be hitting you up in the DMs, BJ, after this photo. Stand by for my DM. So I think you got some business coming your way. That's just
but
beautiful.
dude, you're gonna have to like get some toilet rolls, like 4 toilet rolls, and like you're gonna be in the nod business without AI.
You know what? We could hook him up with Jason, who does NVGs and stuff like that, and good to go. We'll connect.
I mean, truth be told, those are not real. Those are airsoft replicas. So that actually, if you want even more truth to be told, that uniform was actually, I believe, I can't believe which character, but it was one of the characters from 6. And so I had a hookup to get the wardrobe from one of those characters and put them in. And the funny thing is that Skylar's not actually not a soldier. He's a stuntman, a very great shooter and a competitor, and an amazing stuntman, martial artist himself, but never served a day in the military. But he just fit my profile to take the shot.
Beauty. I think it summed it up really well. Just the there's a certain stance that ex-military usually have, and I really think you nailed it with that shot. I think it's just absolutely gorgeous. So let's hit one more photo, and then I don't know if we have any time for the the 5th and 6th one, but let's jump into this one right here. This is one of Sean's. Let's take a look. Oh, this is gorgeous. Pat, thoughts?
Yeah, I love the silhouette of the tree and the exposing for the color of the sky. And I'm not trying to be technical here, but it creates a warm emotion of the whole image, right? And I think it's a greatly cropped one. I'm pretty sure I like this one on Instagram. I'll go through and, I'm not necessarily a person that likes everything of somebody's, but like when I see some of the ones, I definitely, sometimes I'll even have to go back, which I think this was one of the ones I did. I had to go back and make sure that I hit the heart on that one, because it's just it's a great landscape photo. And it's one thing that, like, I think people, when they get into photography, you seem to want to capture everything, right? Like in this particular scene, like Sean could have shot it much wider. Maybe he even did. I doubt he did, because I'm sure that he was laser focused and he's seen what he's seen. But a lot of times we're trying to include way too much into the photo, right? And we've seen a couple now that the example is that like compressing it in, like he didn't include the whole tree. He just created enough of that tree that your eye just kind of wants to follow all the branches, but then you get pulled back into the sun and the sky, right? And you can kind of just feel the calmness of that image, and it just kind of, yeah, it's another one of those like chill you out kind of shots.
It has such a like a good night feel to it, of just like, okay, everything's winding down, it's
Yeah.
sunset, let's all shutter down for the evening kind of thing. It's beautiful. Tanya, what are you thinking?
I think that it's a really good example of contrast, not just the brights and the darks, but of busy and calm. I find it to be really well balanced in that sense, because you've got the sort of active, like all the leaves in the trees, and he's also controlled it by adding that bit of sky, and how the trees in the background are less detailed. So it's just, yeah, it's providing a good counterbalance to the focal point that is the tree. And I've found that over the years that the one of the key things in at least my pursuit of getting the shot is, it's a lot of fighting with your brain about what you think you see and what is actually there, and being able to reconcile the two, because our brains are really good at tuning out what isn't necessary in a shot. So when you take the photo, sometimes you go, why didn't that look the way, the way I saw it? And it's because the camera it's pretty impartial. It captures everything that you point at it, right? So it's about using, it's about, I guess it's the marriage between like something that will impartially capture everything you want, and overriding your brain's ability to tune things out, while being intentional about cutting out all the extraneous stuff, which is what Sean did here. I'm not sure if that made any sense, but it's a lot of, it's almost like a getting out of your own way to get to see what is actually there, but then also working with a device that only sees what's actually there to see what you see. It's kind of hard to explain, but there's a push and pull with that.
I got something else to say about this too.
Give her.
And I noticed this about Sean's photography, which I really enjoy, is he finds framing within framing. So I bet that he did not take one of these photos, but the way that he's framed the sun in this perfect, half square, or what I mean, within the tree and the branch, that it becomes a really nice focal point that you end up dwelling on. And he does that in other photos too, I've noticed, and I think it's really beautiful. Whether it's a foreground framing, it's out of focus, and it creates a focal point, which is, I think, a very important thing, or or if it's direct like this, because it is sharp, but it is framing the sun.
Sean, thoughts?
Well, those are all super insightful. You're both right. That these are things that I try to do, and Tanya, to your point, the camera does capture what the camera captures, and then it's my job to tune it or not. Now, here's the interesting thing: I did crop in a little bit on this, and I had to crop in to create this photo because I've got another photo very similar to this that shows just a couple more feet below the view that you're looking at right now, which actually is a dump. Like it was a garbage tip. There was plastic bags and garbage and stacks of rubble and rocks and just garbage, like for half a kilometer garbage. Now, as I'm taking this photo, immediately on my right, 2 feet to my right, was like 8-lane traffic. So I was actually laying down in the dirt at one point, taking this photo next to a extremely busy highway in Bangkok my last night. And the reason I captured this photo is because we just gone through 6 weeks in Thailand, and I wanted to be able to capture the serenity now moment of the trip. And this is how I chose to do it, because immediately on my right flank, I had all of Bangkok's traffic. And immediately on my left flank, I had the world's garbage dump. But just right in the middle, 2 feet above all of that, in its own little isolated moment, was a sunset that allowed me to capture the warmth of the country and a whole bunch of other layers, if I was being honest. And so it's a technical photo that is challenging technically for any photographer's mind. They'll spend a few minutes thinking about it. But then for people who feel photos rather than think photos, there's something in there for that person as well. But what it doesn't show is the reality of the moment, which is what Tanya was explaining. And that is the camera captured a lot more than just a setting sun. I just had to tune it for the moment.
Interesting. I got quick comment from the River Viking. He says, gives me a Japanese Zen garden vibe, which it really does. And then on the Instagram side, it says, love you chose the tree to be dark while allowing the sun to show its light. Feels like both are sharing in order to make for beautiful images from Abstract Karma. Corbin Bobby says, peaceful and the clouds were moving, right timing. And Tan Cameron says, stunning photograph, makes me want to run to my pit for a nap. Which I really love, because it has that late night kind of vibe to it where I just want to like go rack for a bit. And I just love it.
To me, it doesn't have the rack feeling to it. It has that psychological sigh feeling to it. You know, when your shoulders just kind of relax just a touch and you're just like winding down. It's not like I need my rack. It's like I'm just winding down. I'm detuning the day, you know?
Mm.
I'm not sure if the sound cut
I think
out.
you're muted.
Sorry, my bad. I hit the button, but it didn't work. But I just wanted to say I really appreciate this combo, and I've been thinking a lot about the imagery and all this stuff and the things we've done, and I wanted to pull up one of my favorite images, the ones that I really like. And so I'm going to get you guys to analyze one of my photos that I pulled up here as well. And
I'm going to shred it.
Down for the after.
Was
Shred
this
it all you
whole
want.
podcast just so we can look at your vacation photos?
Basically,
Yeah,
yes.
a big
Okay.
lead up.
yeah. The big lead up to go through my into my vacation photos. But no, this isn't from a vacation at all. This is actually from a work thing that I do every year. I go down to the ranch and I help out with branding. But this was a moment caught during that, and I want you guys to analyze it. Here we go. We'll take a look at it. Well, bam. What do you guys think? Right off the bat. Pat?
I mean, I love a good corvid.
Get it?
I love a good corvid. You know, I'm a sucker for a good crow.
Yeah, no, this is good. I like the graininess of it. I mean, I think the only thing I'm going to tear you apart a little bit.
Give her,
I'm
man.
joking. No, I think that I would have just taken the exposure down just a bit on this, not by much, but just a little bit, just to make the silhouette be a little bit darker. But I also like the choice that you went with, and I love the colors. Yeah, I think you framed it well, and yeah, I think you captured a great moment there.
Well, thank you. Tanya?
Yeah,
any thoughts?
I really dig the moment. It's cinematic. I mean, throw in a 16:9, crop on that. It feel like an opening scene of something. You know what I mean? It feels it's evocative, and it feels like it's telling a story almost effortlessly. So that's always a good sign.
Beauty. Sean, you got any thoughts on this?
I do. And my first thought is, what were you trying to capture? Not I see what you were capturing, but this is more of a philosophical question. What were you trying to capture in that moment?
When I took it, what I was trying to capture was the mixture between the wild, the crow and the sunset and all that stuff, with the fact that you can see the deck and the chair and the thing. So it was the mixture of the two was what I was trying to go for.
And that's what I assumed. And so given that, I would recommend to you that you could have dialed down your light to some degree or reduce the intensity of the light. So we could see just a little bit more of the deck, see a little bit more of those slats. Basically, what I'm saying is you could have adjusted the image within some software to display what you wanted to present. So you've described to me what you were trying to capture, but it feels like there's just something missing. It feels like it needed that extra step. And that extra step to my eye is just dialing down the intensity of the light to display a little bit more of that nature and man, as it were, the slats of the deck. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah. A little bit of post-production. And
A little bit of post.
Yeah. The reason that I brought this photo in for, it's one of my photos, but I wanted to show or highlight, I guess, a little bit the stages between being a photographer, right? Like I'm an amateur of amateurs when it comes to what photography is. And I wanted to bring up a photo of mine that I really liked, I found interesting, to be able to analyze it from your guys' perspective as well, to show that there is a progression through it, in that it's not just...
Well, there is. And it doesn't require a big leap between Chance, who is, interested in photography but hasn't pursued it really hard, and Sean, who is interested in photography and who has pursued it hard. Like 3 months ago when I got this camera, my photos weren't that great. And just yesterday, Tim Turner, Army Sergeant Major, hit me with a DM and said, dude, you're freaking killing it with the photos just recently. And he's right. I am, in context of 3 months ago, but I'm still not happy. I'm still pursuing. I still want more. I can still do better. And so my point is this, Chance. It never stops. Like I look back 3 months ago, and it's not that I'm embarrassed, but I'm like, holding my nose. Some of them were stinkers. And yesterday, I'm happy with yesterday. But 3 months from now, look back 3 months and think, I could have done better. I could have made that Raven pop a little bit more. I could have had more deck slats. I could have showed more of the barbecue. Could have had the mountains, blah, blah, blah. That is, if you have a curious mind and if you want to pursue, you will never settle. You will always think of yourself as a learner mindset. You can be a professional. You can think like a professional, but you got to understand that we're all really just amateurs pursuing betterment.
Beautiful
Yeah,
point.
I can totally. Well, no, I'll piggyback on Sean's comment because it's so true. Especially if you have that mindset and that belief, like that's what produces great images. And I'm super happy with some of my photography right now. But like when I was in the media tent at King of the Hammers, for sure, I'm screen peeking at other people's images, what they're capturing, what they're getting, and I'd say like there's a half of them that'd be like, yeah, I could have got that, I got that, or that looks like something that I would have shot, or that was garbage. I mean, there was that. And then you'd look over at a screen and it would be like someone just punched you in the solar plexus, like you're not good enough. Like that person destroyed you. You were at that exact same point in that exact same area, taking that picture of the exact same car, and his picture just blows your socks off. You feel so much more speed, intensity, fucking cinematic, everything. And that's what I love about photography, is that it's always, yeah, like you can either settle and just take photos and be happy with it, or you can truly dive into the art and continue to like grow. There are plenty of photos, if I were to go back even in my Instagram, that I'm just like, wow, I just cranked the contrast on that one and cranked the clarity, and that's just horrid, like it's really bad. And it's beautiful because you'll go through these like kind of algorithms of different editing, and don't be afraid of editing too. Like, yeah, like I when I provided you my 3 photos, I tried to give you one that was completely in the moment, one that was heavily composite, and one that I had to pre-plan and think out. And the reason that I did that was to show that there's all these different elements to capture great images, and it doesn't matter where you want to go with it. But people get weird about when you edit a photo, especially if you get into the photography world. Sometimes people get weird about editing photos, but they've been doing it for years. If you look at any black and white photo that is like a masterpiece, they were dodging and burning in those photos in a Lightroom to create your eye to go where they wanted you to be intended to go. So I'm sure there's an editor on your phone. Don't be afraid to pop that up. just a couple little tweaks, light tweaks of exposure or contrast, either greater or less, can really change the image for you.
I'm going to play with that for
And
sure. What do you got?
also, Tanya had hit me with this some time ago, like a couple, 3 months ago, whatever the case is. I was just starting to play with the Sony, starting to get some okay results, but I was starting to goof around with Lightroom, Adobe Lightroom. And I was taking the same image and I was like making it minor tweaks, making it feel like it was representing the moment in my mind. And then I was taking the same image and getting all theatrical, getting my jazz hands going and making the sky purple and the trees orange and the sidewalk is now green or whatever. Like I was clowning around with reality through the artificial digital medium. And it's fun. It really is fun. But I was Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Like I was doing this and I was doing that. And really what I had to do, and Tanya didn't challenge me with it. She just said, maybe you have to just decide, are you this or are you that? And I didn't make a big deal out of it. I didn't turn it into a dramatic moment with, you're right. But listen, I never forgot it. And so I just nodded my head and thought, right, that's it. She's right. And so I think it's okay to play around, but don't get lost in playing. Like, don't lose sight of where you started your playing. Like, you can go down to the end of the back alley, but then come back and see where you were and contextualize. And did you even like the back alley? And go to the next back alley. Play around with your processing. Have fun with it, because you're not solving world peace with it. Just play around, see what you like, and things will evolve over time. What you shouldn't do is take a photo and just settle on it. Play around. Like, even try to break the photo. That's better than just a snapshot and walking.
That's a good point. Tanya, you got any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, they covered it all really wonderfully. I'm trying to recall the conversation I had. I think I was showing Sean some photos. His name escapes me right now, but it's a Hong Kong photographer and a street photographer from like the 50s or something. And he wasn't afraid to edit and retouch the photos in order to create the composition to tell the story that he wanted. And yeah, like PJ had said, I don't think people should be afraid of editing. You can push it, you can scale it back. Generally, it's kind of the Coco Chanel thing where you put on all of your accessories and then take one off. So a similar thing where you dial it to where you want, now take it off like 10%, and you're probably where you want to be. And yeah, to not be afraid of editing or retouching, and to know to kind of know what you're about. Like I was talking with Sean, is that if you're aiming to be a photojournalist and telling, documenting the truth, as it were, and the moment, and as it, that will, you'll have to abide by a certain amount of ethics in terms of retouching and editing, right? You can't be like, I'm telling the truth and then creating a constructed image. And it's also okay if you're like, I'm making art using photography. You can retouch, you can do composite images, you can do whatever you want. And it's to really know what your intention with the image, with your craft, to really be clear about that and to use that as your North Star.
It's one of the most important things I heard this year, quite frankly, or it was last year, I suppose, when you mentioned it towards the tail end of the year. And what it wasn't so much about me thinking about how to present a photo to anyone, because again, I've already stated the art is for me. What that conversation did for me when we had that, Tanya, is that it made me consider what I'm doing in photography. And I think that's a good question to ask ourselves every once in a while, every couple of times a year, or once a year at least, is what is photography to me? What am I with photography? What is this photography journey that I'm trying to walk on? And so it's an important question. Just that simple, if this or if that, I think is a worthwhile consideration for any photographer. And not just a half a second thought, by the way. Like, sit down for a day with a cup of coffee and think about what it means to you, the journey.
I think this is a good piece to learn for anything, really. Like, before you do anything, before you, not even before, but during your experience with anything, you have to choose to experience it. Like, it is an actual choice. If you want to be a photographer, and just even whether it be amateur or professional, or you want to do it as a job or a hobby, doesn't really matter. But if you want to experience photography, you have to choose to experience photography. It's not just going to experience itself all of a sudden where you're like, aha, I figured it out. No, it, it's a choice. So I love it. Now, we are a little bit over 2 hours, and I can't thank you guys enough. This has been an awesome conversation. I've learned probably more about the art of photography than I even knew existed. So I really appreciate this. It's fantastic. We got so many comments all around, and I am just stoked for this. So thank you guys. This has been awesome. Pat, Tanya, Sean, thank you. Any final thoughts? Anything on photography? Anything on the images we saw? Anything at all? Pat, you're on top. Anything rattling around the back of your brain?
No, go do it. Take shots, and if it doesn't turn out the way you want, shift your angle, crop in, just change it. Change it till you find it interesting. Because that's what a lot of times what happens is you see something that, looks cool. It could be it could be a cup of coffee. Sean's great at taking pictures of coffee and books and making it look interesting. You want to just kind of sit at that image for a minute, right? And you may not be able to achieve what Sean does overnight, but start playing. Start playing. You got the phone. So many people have cameras at their disposal. Play with it. Dive into the basic editor. Reduce the exposure. Make it moody. Overblow it. Doesn't matter. Have fun with it. Use it as a medium to just slow down and enjoy an image and something that you created. Like, instead of looking at it, like, I love looking at other people's images, don't get me wrong, but I love creating the image and being in that moment and just playing with it. So pursue it. And and I'm not trying to self-plug here, but like, I would really want, within the next 6 months, be launching a program to be working with vets to teach them photography and workshops. I've already been talking to some partners that can make that happen. And as soon as I know that it's a full green light, we're going to make that happen, because I want to be able to take people and let them experience the greater breadth of it. You know what I mean? And depth of it.
Love it. Tanya, any final thoughts?
Just go do it. Go do it with intentionality and have fun. It's fun, and to let yourself enjoy it. Even if I, when I look back at the questionable edits or, editing choices I made, just to have an appreciation, be like, that was then, and I'm learning from it. And you're always learning from it. And also it can be applied to life, but if you find yourself struggling, reduce it down to its simplest elements, to its most foundational elements, and then build from there. It's generally very hard to go wrong when you just keep the fundamentals in mind.
That's a great point. One of the things, I think you told me this initially, we were talking about lighting. You said start in a dark room, then start adding light. And I was like, I never even thought about that, but it's a great point. Strip it down to those bare necessities and begin there. Sean, any final thoughts?
I'm going to wrap it up by following on what Pat just said. One of the greatest tools, not the greatest, one of several great tools that I've used as a veteran to understand the world around me, and more correctly, understand myself, is grabbing a camera. The camera will put you in the moment. It will make you present. It will make you mindful of right now, this second. There's no escaping that. When you're setting up to take the photo, you are in the photo with the photo. And so that is the first important aspect as a veteran, is learning mindfulness or being present in the moment. The photos that you take are a reflection of you. And so if I take a good photo, it's because I was present in the moment and I was particular about what I intended to capture and then let the moment happen. The moment will never happen unless you find a good way to synchronize with the world around you. If you have chaos inside of you, if your soul is unsettled, it will reflect in the photo. The better you get at photos, the more work you've done as the reflection of yourself with a camera. And so, Pat, if anything comes to fruition, or as it becomes more credible as a possibility for this photography with veterans, frickin' count me in any way, shape, or form that I can support that. If I can be your 2IC, if I can be the signaler, if I can be the freaking donkey, whatever, I want to get involved in that. I feel like it's a great way to pay back the veteran community. It's a great way to expand people's minds. I would love for the brotherhood to pick up what you're putting down. So, I'll carry all the bags. Just let me in on that action.
Just make sure you take a photo of Sean being the donkey. That's a requirement. But yes, anything that we can do to help out, I'm not just Sean, but myself, the collective, anybody. If you need connections, by all means, we can always find people that can help in some way. Now, I got a couple comments on the Instagram side I just want to touch on. Diesel Gun Truck, good to see you, Scott. It says right on the money, in the moment. Corbin jumps in here and says intentionally. It's a great word. And Dan Cameron hits us up and says, thank you, collective. I've never watched a podcast before. Now I can't miss yours. You're doing amazing things. So appreciate that, Dan. And Corbin and everybody else that's been watching. Tanya, Pat, Sean, thank you guys again. I don't have anything to add, so I'll just close it off with as we continue to learn, build, and grow about photography. We'll see y'all next week. Chimo.
Chimo.
Thanks everybody for watching and being part of the collective. If this has sparked any thoughts or resonated with you, let us know in the comments. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Your support helps us grow and keeps the conversation going. We'll see y'all next time.